right, so moving on, our last album of the evening is Peter Gabriel's Peter Gabriel 3. I think he got that title from Led Zeppelin. I think that he stole it from them. This album comes in at number 57 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 7 in 1980, number 423 of all time. It's his second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1986's So, which we are going to be covering in a full proper episode, probably in about 6 months or so. It's not on Rolling Stone's list. So my first take on this album was this has got to be Brian Eno producing this, because this just sounds like it's got the Brian Eno production, and it's not Brian Eno. I was surprised to learn it is Steve Lillywhite, who I think we've talked about before, mentioned before, but for some reason I always associate Steve Lillywhite with Dave Matthews Band because of that unreleased album that became released. Was the Lillywhite Sessions was the name of it, so I always think of him because of that. But this to me was a Brian Eno album, and so there's got to be some connections with Steve Lillywhite and Brian Eno. Anyway, I overall like this. Peter Gabriel, obviously, you guys know I'm a big Genesis fan, but it's interesting to hear a solo album from Peter Gabriel, because this does not sound like Genesis. I mean, this is not his 12-minute prog rock kind of mythical, because he was the one that was kind of talking about dragons and mystical kind of nursery rhymes and just stuff like that. And so this is I do know that this is a political album, and it's definitely got a little bit of that world music term that gets thrown around there kind of loosely, but it does have some of those like marimbas, kind of things that might be associated with world music, and he's definitely doing something different than what he did with Genesis. My familiarity with Peter Gabriel before the podcast was basically the hits, and this was another one that I had the greatest hits album for. So I knew the songs on here that I knew were I Don't Remember, Family Snapshot, Games Without Frontiers, and Biko, which were all songs on that album. And I love all those songs. And I think, probably for me, those are the ones that stand out the most. I think Family Snapshot is a great song. That's just the way that enters that piano part. It's very, very beautiful. And then it kind of like it goes in just this different direction. It's a really interesting song. Games Without Frontiers, another really interesting song.
Kate Bush on that one.
Is Kate Bush on Games Without Frontiers?
Kate Bush on that. Yep.
You're right. I forgot about that. And that's obviously, I'm looking at Spotify right now. I mean, that's by far the most played song. It's like 10 million listens. And I think number 2 is I don't remember, which is 1,700,000. So, but Family Snapshot is just, I love that song. Biko's a cool way to end this. So I like, and then the songs I didn't know, like Intruder and No Self Control, I thought were really, really cool songs. And, I like a lot of percussion, a lot of different type of percussion that's going on here with Peter Gabriel. And he's kind of always, I think he's, kind of been like that a lot with his solo stuff. Songs like, I think, and Through the Wire and Not One of Us, I think were probably my least favorite songs on here. They seem to kind of like, I don't know, if they were a little less interesting. They the choruses seemed a little bit weaker to me, but aside from that, I thought, Games Without Frontiers is just a cool, it's kind of like a novelty song because it's so different, but it's also really cool sounding, and it's just got a really cool progression, really cool beat behind it, and I love all the instrumentation that he does. I don't know how Peter Gabriel and maybe we'll get this in the history, the bio that we're going to cover when we do so. But I'm really interested to see, how much of the experimentation with all the musicianship was like Peter Gabriel, like doing it himself and then having other people do it, or was he just working? Were other people kind of coming up with ideas that he just really gelled with? Because he's really got his own unique style. There's not a whole lot of people that sound like Peter Gabriel and do what he does. Yeah. And to listen to this juxtaposed against what was happening with Genesis, it's definitely a diversion. It's like him kind of just owning his own thing. And almost going in a totally different direction than what he was trying to take Genesis in. So he's an interesting dude. I really like Peter Gabriel, and I'm thumbs up on this album.
And we saw him live together.
We did see him live. We got to talk about that, Josh. We saw him do So backwards. We did the whole So album, but he did it instead of front to back. He did it back to front. So yeah.
Well, let me jump in if that's okay. I think I'm second here, right? Or am I wrong?
No,
so something very interesting, guys. I was looking up Steve Lillywhite just out of curiosity. Ready for this to bring stuff talking about Kismet here. Lillywhite was also hired by Rush to produce their 1984 album Grace Under Pressure, but much to their frustration, withdrew from the project to work with Simple Minds.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? And apparently Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee, and Neil Peart referred to Lillywhite as a man not of his word for not following through on what had been scheduled. So he did this Peter Gabriel album, and then the two of the things we did earlier in this episode, he was involved in. What are the chances?
I think the last time we did that was, remember we were talking about Tom York and his influences, and we talked about there was like 3 artists or whatever that we had just covered. In
Robert Wyatt was
Robert
who I
Wyatt
said immediately.
Was one.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fela Kuti was on there as well. That was just like random. Yeah. So
it was pretty funny. But anyway, so I like Peter Gabriel as a solo artist way more than I like Peter Gabriel in Genesis. Mm-hmm. The Genesis Peter Gabriel I felt like was when he was sort of young and experimenting with stuff, sometimes to what I would consider to be not an enjoyable sonic palette. I think the experimentation that Peter Gabriel does on his solo albums is considerably more interesting to me, with one caveat, and that is when Peter Gabriel does world music, which does absolutely nothing for me. And so the last track on this album, Biko, I dislike intensely. It's the Peter Gabriel version that it's too long, it's world music, it's nothing for me. And so I like this album quite a bit, Peter Gabriel 3, but that's not. It's funny because you don't like And Through the Wire, Matt, and Not One of Us, and I actually like both of those songs quite a bit. There's songs with a little bit more, I think, pop sensibility and edge to them, I would say, in terms of their general sound. Like when I say edge, I don't mean the edge in like the art rock pushing boundaries way, more edge in sort of like a harder feel, right? I'm surprised you don't know Self-Control. That song is, maybe it's because my dad loves that song, and God, the album after this is Shock the Monkey, right? Which is like one of my dad's all-time favorite albums.
Phil Collins
I can remember.
is drumming on that too, that song.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can hear it. It's got that drum sound. And although not the drum sound Phil Collins was using in his solo career, interestingly enough. But yeah, I must have listened to that Shock the Monkey album by proxy 20, 30 times in my childhood, of my dad putting it on when he would drive me to places, because it's a personal favorite of his. And he also loved No Self-Control in this album, and I think Peter Gabriel too, and I think when it got to he kind of touched base. But who is the other female singer? It's not Kate Bush, but it's somebody else that she sang backup as well for, I want to say, Michael Jackson. But he did like a piece with her as well, and I'm totally blanking on her name, and I'll look it up. No, later in the. Okay. I guess what I'm getting at is he has a lot of very interesting collaborators, kind of going into what Matt was saying. What I like about this album is I thought this was a really good art rock album. It's an art rock album that I was really connected to, because he was taking chances sonically. He was infusing in different structures in terms of how the songs played out. Sometimes it was a very slow atmospheric build with a lot of space, ominous at times, and then other times it kind of went into, you'd hear like different instruments like the xylophone and stuff like that in the background, and they'd be isolated as sounds, which I liked. It had a little bit of that music concrete, not in the wide stretch of like Eno. Maybe that's why you felt a little Eno, Matt, because he does some of the same things where he isolates these sounds and layers stuff on top of it. But I really enjoyed the shifting he did on this album, and I really enjoyed the fact that he didn't play it safe. Even Biko, which I hate, as much as I hate that sound, I mean, Peter Gabriel is kind of the guy who did world music first, really, when I think about it. I mean, when you think of like Graceland and stuff, that's 5 years after this, right? And Peter Gabriel is kind of the first guy to do sort of the Back to Africa type deal and world music elements. And it doesn't mean I like it anymore, but I respect the fact that he was willing to take chances. Yeah, this one's a pretty significant thumbs up for me. I can expand on it, but I want to hear Josh's take before I do.
Yeah, this was I really like this album. I responded to it immediately in a way that I didn't with Genesis, which, like you guys were saying, his solo sound is so different than Genesis. I do hear aspects of it, like in No Self Control, like that kind of reminded me of a Genesis song or something, but he's always so different. He kind of always goes like one step in the same way that the Talking Heads do. He like goes one step left to the left of where I think things are going to go. I really like the layering aspect that he brings to this album. Like John said, there's a lot of different like percussion in this, and it sounds a little industrial at times or krautrock inspired at times, but it works in such a unique way. Later a song he does, Salisbury Hill is kind of like the example of that always comes to mind. That's such an interesting, unique song that's like only he could do, and I feel like that whatever is in that I respond to, because I love that song so much, is like that's sprinkled throughout this album, whatever creative inspiration he gets. I like the xylophones that are throughout this as well. He seems to also kind of layer in vocal effects at times and isolate people chanting or saying different things, like on the synth in Games Without Frontiers. That's an example of that. Or the part that Kate Bush sings. I feel like that's sampled on a rap song or something, but I couldn't find what it is. And the choruses throughout are also really catchy. I don't remember, I think is my favorite song on this album. I really like singing along to that. And there's kind of like a marching quality to some of these songs, or not a marching quality, but there's like an expressiveness that you want to kind of like shout the chorus to it. It's just kind of always, every song is kind of a little different. Peter Gabriel himself just is different than everything else that we've heard. And that's, kind of like one of the things I always respond to is people they're singular in their sound. The world music part doesn't really bother me so much. I like the Biko song. I thought that was good. Although I haven't heard enough Peter Gabriel to say, maybe he takes it to another level later on and adds more of it. There's like almost like a Nine Inch Nails industrial quality to some of this, like on Intruder as well. I don't know. There's this kind of kept me off kilter in a good way throughout listening to it. It always zigged when I was expecting it to zag, and we say that a lot, but it was a pleasure to listen to. This and Soft Boys are definitely my albums of the week.
And this is another album that's listed as post-punk.
Nice.
Oh no, to me this is more like art rock,
post-punk, post-progressive. That's a new one. Post-prog and progressive pop. So yeah, it's
well, let's use real things instead of fake.
I'm just saying it's what I saw. So yeah. I think it's interesting, like those songs that Not One of Us and Through the Wire. I think it's like, I like the song. It's just the choruses. Like, I think if the chorus I find like really uninspiring or weak or just not really doing it for me, I think in some ways that definitely notches, because the chorus is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be the hook of the song. It's supposed to be the thing. On many songs, it's the best part of the song. And sometimes I actually like it when the verse is the best part, but the hook is, the chorus is still good. I just felt like, I don't know, the choruses there didn't get me as much. But I think overall, I think you're right. You guys are right. It's interesting how every song is different. He's kind of throwing in different things here. He's his own guy, and I wish we were probably covering more of him. I think it's just this and so, because none of the other ones, unless we're doing a cold listen on one of them. But
there's a lot of stuff we have to cover in the 80s, Matt, unfortunately, as much as it would be nice. So
I like the another thing, his songs are really like they build well. Like on a song like Family Snapshot, it really kind of like is a slow build, and then it like punctuates with like the horns and the sax, and it has a sad quality to it too that I really responded to. I don't know, it's just like they're so unique. Every song, you could throw it on and it's kind of timeless in a way, because this doesn't sound like 1980 for sure. It could have been, I wouldn't have known when to place this album really, but it's great.